All right, guys, welcome to Basement Bar Beers, Beards, and BS. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Out of the Blue. I got something really cool. You guys know my obsession with Volkswagen. I've had this obsession for years. I mean, I've got it tattooed on me. I'll take that photo later. But I have this weird obsession with Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, Lamborghini, basically everything that Volkswagen owns. The story of Volkswagen, where they came from. And in the 90s, when I was started driving, those are the cars, when you start driving, those are the cars that leave the most lasting impression on you. New stuff will come out, but you'll always have this weird love and passion for the cars that were cool when you started driving. So I'm 42, turned 42 in July, and I turned 18 my senior year of high school, actually the summer before my senior year of high school. So I turned 16 in the mid to late 90s, which in my opinion, some of the raddest cars were out. So with that said, I'm going to talk about a very special car that I have been dreaming about and eyeballing for almost 15 years. Technically since 2001. It's really been over 20 years. But about 15 years ago, I discovered this car and I had to have it. So I'm gonna grab something to drink and welcome to story time. Nothing fancy today. It's early in the morning. I probably shouldn't be drinking, but that's part of my channel, man. I drink beer. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you about a car that I have named Out of the Blue because I got a phone call out of the blue about this car. So, sit down, strap in, saddle up, grab a beer, sit down. It's story time. So I'm going to tell you the story of this car and how I acquired it and kind of where it stemmed from. So in the late 90s, Volkswagen, in my opinion, had the coolest Golf, one of the coolest Golfs. The Mark III generation GTI and Golf were some of my favorite cars. I've had a couple of them. I had a 98 Jetta GT. It was a 2.0. It was great. I had that car for like over 5 years, which is the longest I've ever owned a car. It was amazing. It wasn't fast, but it was reliable. It was a great car. The engine was brilliant. I bought that car because I couldn't afford and couldn't find one that I could afford. I wanted a 95, 6, 7, 8, couldn't afford the 98, GTI. I wanted a VR6 GTI, black on black, with the golf ball shift knob. Like, I wanted all of those things, but I couldn't find one. So I bought this Jetta, but that's been one of my dream cars was that car. Over the years, I acquired a few of them. I had some really cool low mile VR6 cars. I bought one from a guy, Brian Edel at Eurotech. That was super cool, kind of old school period correct car. Had BBS wheels on it, some really new speed shifter box, just some really, really cool old stuff. It had a Schrick manifold, but I didn't have enough money to purchase that with the car, so Edel put a factory one on it. It still had the Schrick cams in it, but did not have the Schrick manifold, which even 15 plus years ago was a unicorn. So to have one now, it's even more rare than a unicorn. So with all that said, I used to buy magazines, VW Performance magazines, European Car Magazine, Euro Tuner, all those magazines. Like, I used to obsessively go find them when I knew they were out, when they were released. And I bought one in August of 2001. I got this magazine, and it had a driver's edition, Jazz Blue, VR6, GTI. Absolutely beautiful car. And I remember the article. It had Volks racing wheels on it that were white. It had a white badge on emblem on the front and the rear. It had all of the lower trim that's normally black textured on those cars was painted blue to match the car. It had a Schrick manifold, a TT Tektonics exhaust with a Borland muffler on it. It had everything that you could think of this car had. It had the 268 Schrick cams in it. It was beautiful. The driver's editions didn't come with leather interior. They came with this really cool cloth interior, kind of Recaro. But it was a super cool limited run. I think they only made like 200 in the blue. I'm sure somebody in the comments will correct me and tell me I'm a moron, which is fine. I've been called way worse. But I just remember thinking this car was the coolest. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's Eurotech, Atlanta Eurotech stickers on that car. That guy lives in Atlanta. And I wasn't really into the scene yet because I was a broke kid and I didn't have any money. And I had a 98 Jetta GT lowered on some crummy wheels that I got at like Discount Tire. They were as big as I could get back then. For like 16-inch wheels. And I just remember thinking, oh, I got 16s. They weren't cool. The car was lowered on HR springs. My buddy Chris installed them at Eurotech, and I didn't hang out with that group because I was working all the time and I didn't have money to go hang out with these guys. But I was going to find some of these cars, and they started showing up and popping up. And in 2006 or 7, I was driving up and down where I used to live in downtown Marietta, and not far from me, just a few streets over, was a guy named Pete. And I didn't know Pete at the time, Peter. He was the owner of the car from that magazine. He was the owner of this car, and I'll never forget the first line that I read in there, which was Pete quoting his uncle, I believe, and it was like, if it doesn't make the car go faster, what's the point? So everything he ever did to this car was all about shaving weight, making it go faster, making it handle better, but within reason. Like, he didn't gut the car, it had all the interior. So I'm driving down the street and I glance over. I remember I almost wrecked my car and freaked my girlfriend out, Maggie, when I saw that car, because I was like, I know that car. We drove on and drove past that car every day for years. Drove past that car and just kept thinking, I know that car. I've got a magazine somewhere with that car in it. Long story short, I'm sitting on the couch one day and I'm scrolling through Craigslist and that car pops up. The one that's down the street that was in that magazine article pops up. It pops up on Craigslist and I don't even call the guy. I don't even call Peter. I get in my car and I drive down to his house and I knock on his door, and he's already deleted the article on Craigslist because he had changed his mind. So I'm starting to talk to Pete. I had a 2001 VR6 Jetta wagon at the time. It was a 5-speed transmission. It was a super cool car. I loved it. Well, he knew what it was, so he came outside and we were talking about his car and my car, and he was the original owner of the GTI, the Mark III. It was in European Magazine, and that was the car that I had dreamed about when I bought that magazine in 2001. And Pete was in an accident. I don't know all the stories of the accident, but he was in a fender bender, and it smashed the front corner of the car in. Insurance totaled the car out. He buys the car back and said he's going to put it back together. He's the original owner. He's owned this car for 160 some odd thousand miles. So why would he not buy it back? Had super cool parts on it. Like I said, a Schrick manifold and cams and just poured and polished head. It just was a really, really cool car. So he buys it back and he's starting to acquire all the parts to put it back together. He kind of gets tired of putting the car back together, and life happens, and he got busy and lost interest in the car, and it sat. So I told him, I was like, hey man, if you ever change your mind and decide to sell the car, let me know. And he said, well, the reason he was having to think about selling it was the city of Marietta does not let you have a car in the driveway that's visible from the street that is not run. So because his car was in a carport, he must have had a new neighbor after years of it being parked there that complained about his car sitting in the carport, not running. So he didn't have many options, and nobody wanted the car back then because it needed a lot of work and so on and so forth. So he posted it online. His friend called and said, dude, don't sell that car. You will be so upset if you let that car go. Just finish it, man. Put it back together. He goes, well, store it at my barn. So his buddy had some property. He was going to store it at the barn, and I told him it was a horrible idea. Please don't do that. You're going to get rodents and mice and rats and all kinds of stuff inside that car, and it won't be savable. They'll eat through everything. Long story long, he changed his mind and was going to tow the car to his buddy's barn to park it. Fast forward a few years, I wasn't working in that direction anymore, so we didn't drive that way, but I noticed that he had turned the carport into a garage, 2-car garage. And I was like, oh, it's crazy, man. I wonder what happened to the car. And I didn't even know if Peter even still lived there. We had friended each other on Facebook, but that was about all I knew of Pete, and was our short interaction there, and that I felt like I'd known him because the article in the magazine. Well, about a month and a half ago, right around my birthday, I left work a few minutes early to go to a baseball game that my buddy Bradley had given me tickets for to go see the Atlanta Braves play. I couldn't find anyone to go with me, so Maggie was like, just go have a good time, have some beers, and if you have to, call me, I'll come pick you up. I get a Facebook message from Pete that says, hey man, I moved to Virginia. I couldn't take the car with me. I don't want to store it. Do you know anybody that wants it? It's yours if you can come get it. I almost wrecked my truck. I slam on the brakes. I make a U-turn because I wasn't far from his house. So I send him a message that says, dude, please call me. Gave him my phone number. Phone rings within just a few minutes. Have a conversation with Pete that says, hey man, I moved to Virginia, West Virginia, something like that. And I've got a house. It doesn't have a garage. I don't have any place to store it anymore. And I just don't have time for it. I offered it to some other friends and they didn't want it. So I remember that you really, really loved this car, and I thought that, someone like you would appreciate it. So it's in the garage. If you want it, all you gotta do is get it out of the house. The house is on the market and probably won't last long in this crazy market we were having currently. I said, well, I'm on my way to your house. And he said, all right, let me know when you get there. I can access my garage door from the internet and I can open the garage door. So I FaceTime my buddy Zeke, and I tell Zeke this story. I give him the short version. I'm freaking out. Like, my eyes are as big as toilet paper rolls. And I pull into the driveway and the garage door opens up, and there it is. Still sitting exactly where I remember it sitting, but just closed in. It was there. So I start digging through the car. I find a rebuilt head in the trunk. I find the Schrick manifold behind the driver's seat. I find a new hood that's going to go on the car. I find a new fender that replaced the bad one. The front corner's still crinkled in, so that's got to be taken care of. I call my wife, and I tell her, I said, hey, do you remember the blue car in Marietta down the street that we used to drive past all the time? She was like, yeah, the Mark III GTI. Like, she remembered the car. Like, it was annoying about it every time we drove past it. I said, Pete just called and said I could have it. And she goes, like, for free? I was like, yeah, like, for free. She said, well, have you called a tow truck yet? So I called a tow truck, $160. Guy shows up. We have to kind of finagle it out of the garage. I'll post some videos up of that. But I got a phone call out of the blue, which is why it's named Out of the Blue. And she's mine. She's in the garage. But that is the story of how I acquired a car I've been dreaming about my entire life. And I'm not in a place right now to spend a ton of money. So I've been kind of horse trading parts to get this car back on the road. I think I've acquired an engine that is in better condition than the one that's in it. I'll go into that later. But I'm trying to get it back running and driving so that I can get it to a body shop and then really start to tinker with the car and make it run good. I would love for it to be as nice as it was 20 years ago. I don't know if I can make it that nice, but I'm gonna try. I'm super excited about this. I'm gonna post up a bunch of pictures of all this about, you know, me getting it out of the driveway and into the out of his garage and into my garage on the tow truck. And some amazing friends that have helped me along this journey and getting Blue back on the road. So I'm gonna finish my beer and I'm gonna go in the garage and tinker on her a little bit. But until the next beer, there'll be more of this story coming soon as I, you know, build her and get her going. So till the next beer, till the next whatever, Volkswagen adventure, whatever I'm doing, because you never know. Got to keep you on your toes. Cheers. We'll see you guys next time. Oh, look, it's Charles. It's a humble mechanic. Oh, this is him and Paul doing the VR6 swap. Okay, later.